Looking back through my time being alive, it's easy to say that all of my understanding seems to have come from aesthetics, atmosphere, feelings. But the way, when you're in a society, the way that you're forced to communicate is by words. How else do you communicate your feelings and who you are to other people in a way that makes sense to them without doing so through trying to explain it? That's really the only method of conveyance you have, because if you just show the emotions in music or show the emotions in art and you show that to people, first of all, it's not practical. It takes a lot of time to do that when you're in a conversation with someone. You can't necessarily make an art piece that explains everything. And then second of all, they can just look at it and then they can say it's bad, and then just move on, because those types of people have their own methods of understanding the world, and because those things are already in place, they aren't necessarily going to be receptive to this other form of understanding as it is communicated through art. Of course, you can give that to someone who is known for looking at art in a deep way, but they probably already understand you enough just by talking to you for long enough. You don't even necessarily have to explain everything. They just kind of get you through hearing you talk and through seeing the other things that you do, because the type of people who would look deeply into an art piece that you're making are gonna be the type of people who pick up on a little more than just what's directly stated. And so, how do we mitigate this? How is this fixed? And the answer for me has just been trying to create words that do express exactly what I'm feeling and exactly what I am. It's just really difficult trying to figure out, okay, these are the words that exist, these are how I use them, this is how everything makes sense. It's difficult because you end up having to take in so much of what other people are saying that eventually, just by what's the word I'm looking for? See, even now, I'm trying to convey an idea or a feeling, and there's just so many different words that I could use that that I don't really know. I was gonna say by osmosis, and the reason why you say osmosis is because it's associated with like what fucking fish do or whatever, where like you begin to take something on out of what another organism does. Like it changes and builds into its own thing because you see what the other thing does, and then all of that meaning could be explained in a really long time, but instead you just hear the word osmosis, and by hearing it used so many times, and by looking at the context clues surrounding it, you understand what it is well enough without having to think about it. But if you were to just sit down and really explain all of those differences and all of those details within the idea, then you're going to end up just kind of confusing people and going all over the place. So instead, what you can do is just use a word in a creative sentence that makes everything make sense. And so I've learned this just by consuming so much of what other people are saying, watching TED Talks, reading things, blogs, books, watching analysis videos, and all these different things where words are being constructed in order to convey a point or a feeling. And by osmosis, I have been able to take up all of this language just by hearing it for so long, so much, that now I have that within, my arsenal, that now I can use those words, in that type of way. And just by being an individual myself with my own view on the world, I'm able to take those things that I know from these other people and then kind of twist them around in my own way to where the words become unique. And so, what is this nightmare that I've entrapped myself in? Because it's not necessarily always fun to be doing this. Like, I do enjoy trying to form words, and I really enjoy trying to form sentences, rather. I really enjoy trying to, like, see the outcome of what I've made and being able to see that I did convey the point to some extent. But the problem is that there's always going to be ideas that aren't being conveyed just because I'm not at that level yet, that I don't know how to convey those things. And so it's always like a game of catch up for me, trying to figure out how all these other people say these things, and how do I take that knowledge and put it into my own work. So whenever I'm watching another YouTube video, or whenever I'm reading something that words things in a certain way, I'm always thinking about what the meaning is, just kind of inherently. Like, whenever I read something and I come across a really cool sentence, I start to think about what that sentence made me feel. I start to think about the mechanisms that brought it about. I start to think about it structurally, and then I think about it in the context of the rest of the text. And I just do that all the time. Like, it's not something that I really switch on. It's just something that happens. And when you have a brain like mine, where my mechanism of understanding is brought about through looking at an aesthetic and saying, this aesthetic is feeling, then you're going to have a tougher time interpreting and translating those feelings into words, but you end up having to. And it's kind of a nightmare sometimes, as I've said, just because there's so much to the process. There's so much that you have to learn, but it's just what you have to do. And I don't know, man. It's a bad feel at times, but once you finally see that, yes, I've reached understanding with this, yes, this does make sense, it's one of the most satisfying things that I get to do. I don't know, it's like, I've just always viewed things through that light. Like, even if you look at the art that I've made, like, the Struggles of an Outlaw series, those videos are not even really explained much of what they're about. Most of what they're about is just by how they're recorded and what music tracks are chosen. Especially in the first video, like, it's this winding rant about how, you know, I hate my work and how I'm a con artist and all these other things, but less so is what is conveyed said in words, and more so what is conveyed is said by the music that is chosen and the way in which I conduct myself through the film, because I continually break down as the film goes on. Like, you see, even from the beginning, where I'm like, stop, like, it's the dude going insane. And so the meaning that's levied upon you by that film is that this person is in, obviously, a dark place, a weird place, a sad place, and the thing that you have to reconcile with that is not what is being stated in the words, but what is being said by how the person acts and by the music that accompanies that emotion. And so this is even more emblematic within Struggles of an Outlaw 3, in which the majority of the text is music and moments that are building up towards the ending part when it's actually explained what the thing means. But before that point, it's all just irreverent nonsense that, you know, makes a point but is harder to decode just on. Another video where this is conveyed even more is the Not So Surrealist Manifesto video, where I convey the feeling of regret and confusion by the end of the film because it is just a breakdown. There's no words involved, but you see the music accompanying this grand breakdown that is none of what I was trying to convey was actually stated in that film. That's the thing. The way the film works is it's a bunch of different vlogs tied together through editing. I begin the part talking about how I am walking through my house and how I don't feel like the same person anymore. And then we cut into a bunch of other clips just talking about the relationship drama, talking about how I never loved him, and talking about how I'm like a terrible monster and all this other stuff. But if you seriously believed that the point of that movie was to say that love wasn't real and to say that, I don't care and all this other stuff, you completely misunderstood what it was conveying, because the words that were being stated was not the point. That did not say what the film meant. What the film meant was entirely understood by the end of the film. And in the ending, what happens is, first of all, the first song that's used is Where Is My Mind? And it's me walking through the kitchen, and I'm all upset, and I walk through the kitchen some more until I go to a sink and I'm splashing water on my face, and it's literally the camera is at where my eyes are supposed to be, so it's a first person shot. And then from there, it's just scenes of me going into the refrigerator and eating to counter the sense of dread that I was feeling, eating comfort food, etc. And then me slamming doors and breaking down and stuff, slamming into stuff. That was the scene set to Where's My Mind. And first of all, that song is about basically going insane. I know the song itself is supposed to be about being in a lake and being a fish or whatever, but if you associate that more symbolically, or excuse me, if you interpret that more symbolically, then you're able to feel like the song is more about just going insane in general. And then the scene after that is this scene in which I take the final scene from Insomnia Analysis 2, where Digi is talking about going to bed instead of falling into darkness at nighttime. And in that scene, what's being conveyed, again, is just a sense of unhappiness with what's going on, and even some suicide is conveyed in that scene with how my with how my person is continually shifting back and forth, and you see multiple outlaws in that scene that are how do I explain this? Because the point is conveyed in the text. It's not really meant to be conveyed in words, so I'm trying to find a way to translate this. But the outlaws that are walking back and forth become translucent? How do you... The effect that I used to make them walk back and forth was I took the exact same clip and basically I cut at different parts within the clip to make it to where it looked like multiple ones of myself were walking on top of each other. And then from there, what I did was I made them... I made the opacity on them less bright to where the background was less visible and the people were the things that you saw the most. And it looked like they were walking over each other. What was being attempted to be conveyed in this scene was that I was walking around for a long time, because what is understood when you see a bunch of the same person just walking back and forth in the same area, it conveys a sense of time. That, yes, this person has been doing this for so long because you're seeing so many of them walk around the same place again and again and again, so much so that they're layered on top of each other. So that's what that's trying to convey. It's trying to convey that I'm walking around for a long time. And from there, I like do shit with like a knife, and then you see clips of me doing shit with that knife layered over each other, and so it's basically conveying the same idea that for a long time there's a lot of suicidal ideation here. And the clip that's layered over is Digi talking about he's just going to bed instead of letting yourself drift into darkness. And there's a lot of different feelings that are conveyed in that scene. The same with the last one, but ultimately what these two scenes at the end of the film convey is that I was not okay. I was not detached. I was not uncaring about the situation. In fact, I was destroyed. And I had never directly stated this in the film at all in words, but what was conveyed with that film was that I did care. And the things that I was saying before the ending was mainly to blue pill myself into believing that I was something that I was not in order to move on, in order to feel secure and happy. Instead of dealing with the pain of regret, I was trying to detach myself from the situation to where the situation no longer affected me. And then by the end of the film, you see that didn't work. You see how upset I still was, because no matter how much I tried to suppress them, those emotions still existed. And so, the message of that movie was not that I was a red pill incel who didn't care about anybody, a weird manipulative sociopath. The message of that film was that you shouldn't lie to yourself, because the more you push those things down, the more it becomes apparent in the end, which the ending was emblematic of that. And I could have conveyed that in words. I could have done one take vlog where I sat down and I talked about that idea. But if I just did that, it wouldn't have been understood in the same way. If you're not seeing the emotions being blasted onto the screen, if you're not seeing these things being conveyed in that way, then it's not going to be understood in the same way. And I think that's the most important thing to realize with the intentionality behind a lot of these videos, because I don't necessarily always know how to convey something like that, especially when, at the time I was recording the video, even though the message of the video was to not, blue pill yourself into believing these terrible things about yourself, I still did it anyway. It was like my subconscious was desperately trying to tell myself not to think this way, but at the end, I didn't even really understand the lesson of my own movie. So, of course, when I'm doing that, when there's that little understanding on my part, that I'm not going to be able to explain it all in words, because this is how humans function. They don't always get the whole picture. They don't always know all of the logic. They don't always know all the words that are associated with what they're trying to explain. And so, the way that they make that understanding visible is by way of art, by way of interpretation, by way of abstraction. And the truly smart people are the ones who can translate into that into words. But there's so much that is lost in translation, unless you're super good, but even then it's not the same thing. And so the important thing to realize here is that the understanding that's paramount to this whole thing is going to be sought in so many different ways, and that my brain, the way it's structured just by watching these videos, is to do it through aesthetics and through filmography. And that's what I'm trying to rectify with learning how to speak better. The thing about YouTube is you are projecting an image. You're projecting a personality onto the audience that the audience can then identify with, understand, or just feel. When you start up your video and they see your face, they associate that face with multiple factors. Maybe these factors were manufactured by you, or they're just things that inherently come about when people think about you. The thing about people is that through their upbringings, they all have individual traits that are embedded within them. We all have different experiences, and those experiences manifest themselves in different ways. The thing about YouTube is that it takes that element of being a person, and through things like vlogging, through things like Let's Plays, etc., you are taking your person and putting it on the screen. You're directly projecting your words onto a camera, and by making so many videos over time, there are inevitably going to be elements that are continuous within each one. There's a continuity that forms just by you being yourself. Even if you're constantly changing in your views, in your ideology, in what you do and say and look like, that's going to be a continuous element of your narrative that the viewers then identify with you. You can't really get away from it. You can't really get away from this idea of personalities or narratives within your work, because at the end of the day, you are one person making a thing, and so each time a video comes out, it's now going to be connected to all of the other videos that you've made subconsciously. You can't get away from it. That's just how YouTube works. That's how humans work, because humans are, at their core, based on all of their experiences, based on everything that happens to them. So what does this mean for people like me, who are trying to project an atmosphere with their videos? My videos, I seek to bring about understanding about a certain type of person, a type of person that isn't necessarily represented by most people. And I think that, like, over time, as your videos continue to come out, that eventually it doesn't matter what's being stated directly, there's going to be this undercurrent of who you are just all throughout. And what I mean by this is that one records in, say, a dark room, and all of their videos before that point have the themes of a certain reason as to why they do that. And so you can be talking about just a random thing, a completely random thing that kind of has to do with that subject, and then the fact that you're doing that thing in that atmosphere is going to project those other ideas onto what you're currently talking about, because even though it's only a small detail, it connects back to all those other things, because you've mentioned why you're doing that, you've mentioned why you look that way, you've mentioned why you talk that way. And so even though you're talking about something completely irrelevant, it's going to connect back. There's always an undercurrent of that atmosphere. And I believe the reason why so many channels begin to garner the identity that they do is just because who they are is completely genuine. Where that genuinity comes from is just by showing it. Like, the feeling of someone's videos comes through just by being themselves, just by saying the truth as it is. And so when you watch them in their space and you begin to pick up on those details, oh, he's doing this for that reason, oh, this thing is that way for that reason, you can begin to extrapolate certain ideas about how that lifestyle affects them, as they've stated themselves, or just about what they're thinking. they can be talking about one subject, for example, that kind of relates to the other subject, right? And because you know about their thoughts pre-established on that other thing, it clues you in to how they feel about this new thing. And so you can just kind of continue connecting the dots from there. And in spite of the fact that they're talking about something not even connected to any of the other subjects that they're talking about, the way in which they're saying it and the place in which they're saying it forms an identity of its own that then informs your thoughts on their current topic. They're in a dark room. They're speaking a certain way. They're isolated. What are their thoughts on this? You've heard their thoughts on this. And then that goes back to inform exactly what they're doing right now, exactly what they're saying. And so the atmosphere of their videos comes through an undercurrent of sorts that you've heard those things before, and they're not directly stating them anymore, but they're just sort of taken as a fact of the channel at that point, that all of the videos that you watch of theirs are sort of filtered through the expectation that you understand these other things about them. And so when you see them say one thing, how you interpret that thing is interpreted through the lens of someone who has said all of these other things. And how you feel their videos internally, how you feel when you watch them, is determined by how you feel about that person and how you feel about what they're currently doing, which is being themselves, which you have context about, which you have your own upbringing as a person that leads you to feel a certain way about that person. So what I'm trying to say is that no matter what you do on this platform, no matter what it is, no matter what you say, it's all going to be interconnected, because that's just how being a human being works. If you're truly honest about what it is you're going for, about what you think, then eventually you're going to see a through line within all of it, a pattern of sorts, which then creates a narrative, which then creates an identity. And that identity can be seen even when you're doing the most mundane things. You begin to see a thread by which the entire narrative forms itself. And so I think on YouTube, it's really important to recognize that what's directly stated itself is not always the most important part. Sometimes it's the quiet moments that say the most, that just watching a person be in their own environment is going to make a statement emotionally that we begin to understand, more than necessarily stating what that emotion that they're trying to convey is. Because an emotion can be anything. You know, when you're trying to convey an emotion in a video, it can be all kinds of things. It can be done all kinds of ways. And sometimes the simplest thing that you're trying to convey is just who you are. You can directly state that, sure, but it's not necessarily going to be felt in the exact same way as showing it. If you show who you are just by talking about, say, a manga or something like that, and if you show your living space, and if you show the way in which you live in that space, for example, I'm in the dark right now, what does that say about me? I'm talking a certain way right now, what does that say about me? Talking about the manga, and you relate that manga back to small little things that are kind of doing with you, but not making any big grand statements, the things you know about that person are going to become flooding in. You know, they're going to start coming in like, oh, I know this thing, oh, I know that thing about this person, I know that thing about this person. The narrative kind of connects itself. But you can already extrapolate a lot of things about who that person is just by seeing where they are. And there's a lot of words that can be conveyed in something as simple as a room a person's in, in something as simple as how fast or how slow they're talking and what they're saying and what they're talking about. All of these things can lead to striking an emotion within the viewer, and I think that's one of the most interesting things that a YouTuber can convey, and to an extent all of us convey that. It's just that some of us try to convey that emotion through stating and clarifying and all these other things, whereas other of us just show it. It's just right there, without any words. And then most of us just do a combination of that. I think when you're presenting yourself without much of, without much of, what's the word? You know what I'm talking about. Without much of a guard, without much of a filter, you begin to just inherently present that atmosphere. You begin to just inherently show what's behind the veil, even if you're not trying. If you're just being honest, the through line is going to be shown. The dots are going to be connected eventually. And so when it comes to YouTube and how the narrative forms, it just kind of forms by you doing it. You don't do anything that particularly incites it. You can try to form a manufactured narrative, a manufactured character, but everything you say eventually is all going to play into some kind of identity. That's the point I'm getting across.